I turned 70 on a Sunday, the kind of bright Ohio morning that makes even the old maple in my yard look newly awake. My daughter, Paige, insisted on hosting a little party at her house. "Nothing fancy, Mom," she said. "Just family, a few neighbors, cake." I am Elaine Cooper, retired literature teacher, widow, and the last person you can surprise with words on a page. Books taught me that flattery is a costume and promises are a plot device. Still, I brought a bundt cake and my best earrings. When children say they want to celebrate you, you let them try. Paige's living room smelled like citrus cleaner and new money. Balloons spelled out Happy 70, and a slideshow of my life flickered on the TV. Sepia wedding photo, toddlers in Halloween costumes, me at a chalkboard with a line from Dickinson underlined twice. People hugged me, pressed paper plates into my hands, told me I did not look a day over 65. I laughed on cue, but there was something in Paige's smile, tight at the corners, careful the way you carry a glass that's too full. My son, Grant, arrived late in a Navy suit on a weekend, lawyer casual and humming with importance. He kissed my cheek and said, "Mom, today we make things simple for you." Simple to Grant meant paperwork someone else would control. They sat me in the good chair near the fireplace as if I were a guest speaker at my own life. Neighbors clustered by the island. My oldest friend, Ruth, squeezed my shoulder. "If this turns into a roast, I'm stealing you," she whispered. "Promise?" I said. She nodded once. Paige cleared her throat and tapped a spoon to a glass. "Everyone, thank you for coming. Before dessert, Grant and I have a few words. It's about planning and peace of mind." She glanced at my hands as if they might fly away. Grant produced a leather folder from his briefcase and laid it on the coffee table like an altar book. He opened it to a page with tabs the color of warning signs. "Mom," he said, voice warm the way courtroom voices are trained to be, "you've done so much for us. After Dad died, you held everything together. Now it's our turn to hold things for you." Paige chimed in, "We've taken care of all the hard parts so you don't have to worry anymore." I looked from one child to the other. My children, my students once, now eager to teach me obedience. In the reflection on the TV screen, I could see my face, calm, lined, unamused. I folded my hands so they would not shake. Fear makes noise. Resolve is quiet. Grant slid the top document forward. I caught the heading without moving my head. Family Trust Agreement. Appointment of Successor Trustees. Beneath it, another, Advance Healthcare Directive. And a third, Durable Power of Attorney. A trinity of custody. Grant smiled for the room. "This is just to make life easier, Mom. Doctors prefer a single decision maker. Banks do too. You've been misplacing bills, and we noticed the stove left on last week." Ruth's hand tightened on the back of my chair. The room shifted around us, polite silence moving in like fog. Paige said brightly, "It's love, Mom. We're protecting you. You won't even notice the change." In my classroom, I taught freshmen to circle words that try too hard. Protecting, simple, peace. Good words can hide bad doors. I reached for my water and took a slow sip so I would not speak too soon. Grant tapped the signature line. "We've booked a notary for later today," he added, almost cheerful. "You sign, we file, and you get to focus on enjoying life. We'll handle the rest." Ruth leaned closer, her voice thread-thin. "Elaine, do you want me to call your doctor?" "No," I said, keeping my eyes on my son as if he were a student struggling with honesty. I set the glass down and felt the old steadiness return, the one that carried me through funerals and final exams. I smiled the way a librarian smiles over a rule everyone else forgot. "How thoughtful," I said. "Truly." I brushed a crumb from my lap and looked at the folder as if it were a beach novel I might skim and abandon. Then Paige squeezed my hand and delivered the line that told me everything I needed to know. "Mom," she said brightly enough for the neighbors to hear, "you don't need to worry about anything anymore." Someone clapped. The slide on the TV changed to a photo of me holding both my babies at once. Grant lifted a pen like a toastmaster. Ruth inhaled sharply. And I, the woman they were already burying in paperwork, smiled into the applause and thought, not today, not without reading every line. The notary arrived that afternoon, right when the coffee had gone lukewarm and the laughter had turned polite. Her name tag read Dawn. She had the expression of someone paid to pretend things were normal. "Mrs. Cooper," she said. Just a few signatures and we'll be all set. I wanted to ask if she often notarized ambushes. Instead, I folded my napkin and smiled. Of course, I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. Grant guided me to the dining table like a stagehand setting a prop. The folder waited beside a bouquet of lilies, funeral flowers masquerading as celebration. The neighbors shifted closer, eager for closure they didn't understand. Paige poured more lemonade, her bracelets chiming like applause. Mom, this is just about convenience. You'll still have everything you need. You just won't have to deal with all the stress. I see, I said. And what stress is that? Grant chuckled. Paying bills, signing checks, keeping track of documents. You've been forgetting things lately. Like what? The power bill, the car registration. Last week you left the garage door open all night. I looked at him evenly. Strange, I don't have a garage. For a moment, silence, then laughter too loud, forced. Paige shot him a warning look. Mom, we just want to make sure you're cared for. Ah, I said softly. Care. I tapped the stack of papers. Such a generous word. The notary cleared her throat. If you're ready, we can start with the trust document. Grant handed me the pen, a heavy silver one engraved with his firm's logo. You'll sign on each tab, Mom. Ruth whispered behind me. You don't have to. It's fine, I said aloud, though my hand trembled with something between anger and clarity. I flipped the first page slowly, scanning lines about successor trustees, management authority, incapacity verification, legal poetry for legalized theft. The guests pretended not to listen, but every head tilted closer. Paige leaned down. Don't overthink it, Mom. Just trust us. Trust, I repeated. Another generous word. Grant placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You always told us to plan ahead? I did, I said, setting down the pen. But in literature, that's called foreshadowing. The room tittered nervously. Dawn, the notary, smiled too brightly. We just need your acknowledgement, ma'am. I acknowledge, I said evenly, that I'm being cornered at my own birthday party. Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Grant's face flushed red. Mom, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. You are. Paige's voice went brittle. You're being dramatic. Everyone here can see we're just trying to help. Help comes with a choice, I said. This feels more like a verdict. Grant pushed the folder toward me again. Please, Mom, it's for your safety. Ruth stepped forward then, hand on my arm. Elaine, you don't have to sign anything today. The notary froze, eyes darting between us. Paige hissed, Ruth, this is family business. That's exactly why it needs witnesses, Ruth said firmly. I met her eyes and felt the room tilt back in my favor, if only slightly. I picked up the pen again, slowly, deliberately, then drew a single neat line across the signature page. Not my name, just one horizontal stroke that ruined it. There, I said, a placeholder for when I've read every word. Grant's jaw clenched. You're making a scene. No, I said, standing. You made one. I'm just choosing the ending. Paige's face fell, her script slipping. Mom, please don't embarrass us. Too late, I said. You already did that part. The notary packed up quickly, muttering something about rescheduling. Guests murmured excuses and drifted toward the door. The slideshow kept looping my wedding photo, as if the TV itself pitied me. Ruth helped me with my coat. You okay? She whispered. I'm fine, I said, but they won't be when the real reading happens. 3 days after the party, the doorbell stopped ringing. Neighbors who had hugged me over lemon cake now waved from the sidewalk without slowing. A rumor travels faster than a police car. This one had sirens. Paige's friends whispered that I had good days and bad days, and the town translated it to one word, incompetent. On Monday morning, I tried to pay the gas bill. The online portal refused my login. The password reset went to an email that was no longer mine. At the bank, the teller smiled at me like a camp counselor. According to our records, Miss Cooper, your accounts are now under trustee supervision for your protection. For my protection, it is astonishing how many locks wear that label. I walked home past the hardware store where my husband once spent Saturday mornings choosing the exact right screw. The owner, Mr. Dorsey, lifted a hand, then dropped it as if he'd touched a hot stove. I realized he'd seen the paperwork, or thought he had. Maybe Grant showed him. Maybe Paige did. Humiliation loves company. My phone lit up with appointments I hadn't made: geriatric assessments, home safety evaluations, a consultation for age-in-place remodeling. Someone had scheduled a stranger to measure my bathroom and decide if I deserved to keep it. I deleted the calendar invites one by one. They returned 5 minutes later, mirrored from an account labeled Cooper Family Trust. Ruth came by with soup. We sat at my kitchen table, the one with the dent from when Grant slammed his backpack into it at 16 and apologized with flowers the next day. "She's calling you forgetful," Ruth said, meaning Paige. "She told the book club you left the stove on and burned a pan." "I burned a pan making jam when I was 35, I said. "I scraped it clean and kept going." Ruth reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to say something to them?" "No," I inhaled, slow and thin. "Let them write their story. I'll publish mine when it's ready." That night, the house felt wrong, as if someone had put all the furniture back a half-inch off. I opened the hall closet and found a box labeled with Paige's handwriting: "Winter, donate." Inside were my wool coats, carefully folded as if I were already gone. I carried the box to the bedroom and tossed each coat back into the closet, whispering the names of winters they'd survived. The storm of '94, the year of black ice on Maple, the February my husband's heart quit and the world kept going. Every coat hung like a refusal. In the bottom drawer of my nightstand sat a photograph of the four of us: my husband in a flannel shirt, Paige with gap teeth, Grant with grass-stained knees, me in a sweater I'd knit gray by mistake and loved anyway. I held the picture until my hands stopped shaking. Then I slid it back where it belonged. When the house finally went quiet, I stood at the kitchen sink and watched the porch light blink against the dark. I thought of my classroom, the way I told freshmen that a protagonist always reaches a point where the world appears to agree she is finished. That is the page where readers decide whether to care. The phone buzzed. A text from Grant. "We scheduled a notary for Friday at 10. Please be ready to sign." Another from Paige. "We picked out a recliner for you. So comfy. You'll love it." I set the phone on the counter and turned off every light in the house except the lamp by the window. If they wanted me dim, I could be a lighthouse instead. I made tea and wrote 3 sentences on a yellow pad. The first was a memory, the second was a plan, the third was a promise. Then I put the pen down and let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes by the stove I was accused of forgetting. When the timer chimed, I wiped my face, washed the mug, and went to bed. I have never been good at quitting in the middle of a chapter. Morning would come, and with it, the part where a woman stops being a rumor and becomes the author again. Morning arrived like a verdict, and I decided to appeal. I woke before the robins, brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon, and opened the drawer where I keep the things no one knows I know: a tiny flash drive, my late husband's address book, and a business card for a lawyer who never forgets the difference between family and fiduciary duty. I called him first. "Mr. Alvarez, this is Elaine Cooper. I'd like to schedule a competency evaluation, a review of a trust, and a will contest. Possibly lunch if the day goes well." He laughed once, the kind of laugh that says he's heard worse. "Mrs. Cooper, I can meet you at 10. Bring any documents you have, and don't sign anything else." By 9, Ruth had driven me to his office, a brick building that smelled like old case files and new strategy. Mr. Alvarez wore a navy tie and a face that never blinked at bad news. I set the notary card on his desk and began my recital the way I'd taught generations of students: claims, evidence, sources. I told him about the party, the folder, the lines about incapacity. I told him about the bank, the calendar invites, the box of coats labeled "donate." Ruth supplied dates and times like a chorus that refuses to be ignored. Alvarez nodded through it all, taking notes in a tight print. "First, we secure the foundation," he said. You need contemporaneous medical confirmation of capacity, 2 evaluations, 1 primary care, 1 neuropsych, video recorded, chain of custody sealed. Once we have that, we file an emergency motion to freeze any transfers under the so-called family trust. Then we address the documents themselves. And the notary? I asked. We'll subpoena her journal and any ID scans. If signatures were obtained under misrepresentation or duress, they won't stand. Also, Miss Cooper. He paused. Do you already have a will? I do, I said. A new one, executed 3 months ago with video. Assets placed into the Cooper Literacy Foundation, a charity I control while alive. My children are beneficiaries of scholarships only, contingent on good behavior and actual work. Ruth squeezed my arm. You magnificent fox. Alvarez almost smiled. Then phase 2 is easier than most. We file notice of the prior valid will and move to invalidate any later instruments. In the meantime, I recommend you gather proof of their intent. I took the flash drive from my purse. Already gathering. I described the smart speaker they never mute, the doorbell cam that stores to the cloud, and the way Paige loves group texts with subject lines like family plan, urgent. Ruth had screenshots, I had audio. Together, we had a record of every time they said protect, but meant possess. At noon, Alvarez escorted me to Dr. Hahn's office for the first evaluation. Dr. Hahn asked me to draw a clock, name 4 presidents in reverse order, and interpret a proverb. I wrote a sonnet's worth of answers in my head and settled for concise out loud. When she finished, she said, "If I ever forget my car keys, I hope it's to visit someone like you." She agreed to video a brief statement for the court, steady, clear, unequivocal. By 3, we were at the neuropsych clinic. Tests clicked by like metronomes, memory lists, pattern sequences, trails that want you to lose your place. I didn't. The clinician sealed the results and handed them to Alvarez with a tamper label that looked satisfying enough to be art. We ended the day back at Alvarez's office drafting a motion, emergency injunction, status conference, notice of prior will, request for sanctions. I initialed every page. Ruth watched me sign, jaw set like a forewoman delivering a verdict. Before we left, Alvarez asked, "Anything else you want, Mrs. Cooper?" "Yes," I said. "When we're done, I want it in the record that a woman can be 70, sentimental, and still the author of her own estate." Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Ruth started the car. My phone buzzed, a new group text from Paige, titled Ready to Finalize Friday. I typed nothing. Instead, I opened the Cloud app and watched the newest upload from the doorbell camera. Grant on my porch at dusk, telling Paige on speaker, "Once she signs, we list the house Monday." I pressed save, named the file Exhibit A, and smiled. Class was back in session. Friday arrived with the kind of calm that makes storms jealous. I dressed deliberately. Navy skirt, pressed blouse, pearls my husband had bought the year Grant learned to walk. If my children wanted an image of frailty, I would give them a portrait of poise instead. Ruth waited in the car, thermos in hand. "Ready for curtain call?" she asked. "Ready for grading," I said. At the courthouse, the hall smelled of sanitizer and pride. Grant stood near the clerk's desk, phone in hand, looking every inch the son who knew best. Paige fluttered beside him, rehearsing concern like a speech she'd over-memorized. When they saw me with Alvarez, confusion replaced confidence. "Mom," Paige said, too sweet, "you didn't have to come. We were handling this for you." "I'm sure you were," I replied, handing my purse to Ruth. Grant greeted Alvarez stiffly. "I'm counsel of record for the Cooper Family Trust." "Then you'll appreciate efficiency," Alvarez said. "We're filing an emergency motion to stay any transfer pending judicial review. Here's your copy." Grant's jaw flexed. "On what grounds?" "Competency, duress, and fraud," Alvarez said evenly. "And before you object, the court already has 2 medical evaluations verifying Mrs. Cooper's full capacity, plus certified video exhibits." Paige's face drained of color. "Video of what?" "Of me," I said, drawing clocks and quoting Shakespeare. "Apparently. Turns out I still know the difference between a lend me your ears and a hand me your checkbook." Grant laughed once, thin and forced. "Mom, you're making this adversarial. We just want to protect you." That's the interesting part, I said, because I'm here to protect myself. The clerk called the docket number. We entered the hearing room, a narrow space lined with worn flags and long patience. Judge Ellery was the kind of man who could silence a room just by lifting his glasses. Alvarez opened neatly. Facts, dates, exhibits. He played the doorbell video, Grant's voice crisp through the speakers saying they'd list the house Monday. Every click of the mouse was another nail in their credibility. Grant objected, citing privacy. Alvarez countered with property rights. The judge sustained our exhibit. Paige gripped her brother's arm. Grant whispered something sharp that didn't reach the microphone. Then Alvarez submitted the flash drive of group texts, subject lines screaming family plan. My daughter's emoji-filled betrayal scrolled across the projector like a lesson in irony. Finally, Alvarez introduced the two sealed medical reports. Both doctors attest to Mrs. Cooper's mental soundness. One even remarked she'd prefer to have Mrs. Cooper's memory at 70. The judge looked over his glasses at me. Mrs. Cooper, do you understand these proceedings? Yes, Your Honor, I said. My children attempted to transfer my assets under the pretext of incompetence. I am merely objecting to fiction being filed as fact. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Grant tried one last tactic. Mom, please, this is embarrassing. We're family. Exactly, I said. That's why it matters. The judge signed the temporary injunction with a single stroke. All accounts and property under the Cooper Family Trust are hereby frozen pending review. Hearing reset in 2 weeks. Grant swallowed. Paige blinked fast enough to fan herself. I thanked the court and turned to leave. In the hallway, Ruth exhaled hard. You just out-lawyered a lawyer? I taught debate for 30 years, I said. They should have remembered my grading rubric. We stepped outside into the October light. The courthouse clock struck noon, 12 clean chimes for every month my children would now spend explaining themselves. I looked at Ruth. That was the midterm. She smiled. And the final? Oh, I said, tucking the court copy under my arm. That's the reading of the will. I expect full attendance. 2 weeks later, the courthouse smelled of dust and disinfectant, like every story waiting to be rewritten. Paige and Grant arrived early, matching navy suits, matching nervous smiles. Their lawyer, some junior associate from Grant's firm, carried a briefcase heavy with confidence and light on facts. Ruth and I took our seats behind Alvarez. He looked as calm as a man at a chessboard where he already knew the last move. Judge Ellery adjusted his glasses. We're here on Cooper vs. Cooper, petition for validation of the family trust. Mr. Alvarez, you may proceed. Alvarez rose. Thank you, Your Honor. What my client's children attempted is a textbook example of constructive fraud, using familial trust as leverage to seize control of her estate. We have exhibits to demonstrate not only motive but planning. He gestured to the screen. The first slide appeared, a screenshot of a group text titled, Family Plan, Monday Listing. Paige's message glowed in cheerful blue. Once she signs, we can move funds to the trust account and prep the sale. Don't tell Mom yet, she gets emotional. Paige's attorney objected. This is hearsay. Not when authenticated from her own phone records, Alvarez replied. Grant leaned toward the microphone. That conversation was taken out of context. I leaned forward. Context being that you intended to sell my home before I even knew it was listed? He glared. We were protecting your assets. By liquidating them? I asked. Judge Ellery tapped his pen. Counsel, control your client. But Alvarez wasn't finished. Next exhibit, the doorbell footage, already admitted under prior motion. Mr. Grant Cooper telling his sister, quote, once she signs, we list the house Monday. The courtroom speakers played Grant's voice again. The timestamp blinked like an accusation. Then came the emails. Paige to Grant, doctor's note template attached. The room went still. Paige's attorney stammered. Your Honor, those were drafts. My client never... Alvarez interrupted smoothly. Drafts obtained from a shared Google Drive under the label Cooper Trust, admin. He paused. We also subpoenaed the notary's journal. Her signature log shows both children signed as witnesses before their mother had reviewed the documents. That's not a trust, it's an ambush. Gasps from the gallery. Ruth squeezed my hand under the table. Grant stood. Your Honor, This entire proceeding is our mother's revenge. She's been manipulated. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Cooper. The only manipulation I see is the one described in these records. Alvarez nodded to me. Mrs. Cooper, would you like to address the court? I stood, every nerve alive but steady. Yes, Your Honor. I'm a retired literature teacher. I've read more betrayals than most people have lived. I know foreshadowing when I see it. My children didn't ask me to trust them. They demanded it, with witnesses and paperwork. They called me forgetful, fragile, a liability. But I remember every bill I ever paid, every scraped knee I ever bandaged, and every dollar I loaned without asking back. Paige whispered, Mom, stop. I'm not finished, I said. For months they told people I was declining. They even fabricated a medical note to justify taking control. I have the real reports from 2 licensed physicians confirming I am of full sound mind. I also have the certified video from both evaluations. Alvarez cued the monitor. On screen, Dr. Hahn's calm voice filled the room. Mrs. Cooper demonstrates high cognitive function and full understanding of her financial affairs. The judge watched, expression unreadable. When the clip ended, he turned to Paige and Grant. Do either of you contest the authenticity of these reports? Neither spoke. Paige's face had gone paper white. Then, the judge said, I find sufficient evidence of competence and duress in the creation of the family trust. Alvarez slid one more document forward. Your Honor, before we conclude, there's one last exhibit, Mrs. Cooper's prior valid will, executed 3 months before the trust, notarized and video witnessed. He handed copies to the clerk. I watched Grant's lips move as he read, confusion curdling into disbelief. Paige gasped. The Cooper Literacy Foundation, what is this? My will, I said. All assets transferred to a charitable trust dedicated to adult education, run by me until I die, then by the board. My children will receive scholarships if they qualify by merit. You cut us out? Paige whispered. I gave you a chance, I said quietly. You turned it into a transaction. Grant's composure cracked. You can't just, this isn't fair. Fairness, I said, was when I asked for honesty and you gave me signatures. The judge signed the final order. The court hereby declares the family trust null and void. Control of all assets reverts to Mrs. Cooper. Petitioners are barred from acting as trustees or agents. The gavel fell, one clean note that sounded like a sentence ending. Grant's lawyer gathered papers with shaking hands. Paige sat frozen, staring at the screen where her own texts glowed like ghosts. Ruth exhaled. Alvarez packed the files with the care of a man shelving a finished case study. Mrs. Cooper, the judge said, softening, you may wish to consider restraining orders if necessary. I'll consider it, I said, but I think humiliation will do the job for now. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already heard whispers. Ruth and I walked past cameras as the October wind carried fragments of their questions. What will you do now, Mrs. Cooper? One shouted. I smiled. Teach again, I said. Lesson 1, never mistake silence for surrender. 3 weeks later, the world felt lighter, like a classroom after final exams. The gossip had burned itself out. Paige's real estate license was under review. Grant took an indefinite leave from his firm, citing family matters. They'd tried to reach me, emails with subject lines like, please talk and we miss you. But Alvarez advised letting silence do the talking. I'd spent a lifetime teaching students that some essays grade themselves. Ruth and I met at the diner across from the courthouse. She brought pie, I brought the satisfaction of due process. Think they'll show up today? She asked. They always do when there's something left to lose, I said. At exactly 1:30, Paige and Grant entered. They looked older, not in years but in posture. The pride was gone, replaced by the uneasy politeness people wear in banks and funerals. Mom, Paige began softly, we wanted to apologize. I nodded. I'm listening. She glanced at Grant, then back at me. We went too far. We were scared about your health, about everything. Scared people ask for help, I said. You drafted contracts. Grant's jaw tightened. We were trying to protect what Dad built. Then you should have remembered what he built it on, I said. Trust, not trust documents. They fell silent. I slid 2 envelopes across the table, one each. Inside were payment statements, debt transfer notices from Alvarez's office. I purchased your personal loans, I said. The ones you co-signed for each other years ago. I'm now your creditor. Paige's eyes widened. Mom, you wouldn't. I would, I said, because accountability is the only inheritance worth leaving. Grant exhaled sharply. What do you want from us? Change, I said. You both volunteer at the Cooper Literacy Foundation. 5 hours a week for a year. Teach adults who can't read. Learn what real helplessness looks like. When you complete that, I'll forgive the debt. Until then, interest accrues at 6%. Ruth almost choked on her pie, half laughing, half gasping. Paige covered her mouth. Grant stared at the paperwork like it was a foreign language. You're serious, he said. As a syllabus, I replied. They left without finishing their coffee. The diner went quiet again except for the clink of Ruth's spoon. You know, she said, I think you might have invented moral foreclosure. I smiled. About time English class paid off. That evening, I sat at my desk by the window, the same one where I'd graded essays, written lesson plans, and once believed parent-teacher conferences could fix anything. On the screen, the Cooper Literacy Foundation website blinked live. Our mission? To teach that knowledge is the only inheritance no one can steal. I uploaded a new donation entry. Founding endowment, in honor of those who tried. Outside, the street lamps hummed to life. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch at the sound of my own name. Ruth texted goodnight. Alvarez emailed a simple line. Case closed. You did beautifully. I closed the laptop, poured a single glass of wine, and whispered the same 3 sentences I'd written weeks ago. The first was a memory. The second was a plan. The third, now complete, was a promise kept. I looked toward the dark window and saw my reflection, steady and unafraid. They tried to bury me in paperwork, I said aloud, but I made it my paper crown. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Women 65 Plus USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.